Qualitative data analysis with in vivo. The in vivo is very popular among the qualitative researchers because of its strong coding function. However, before knowing what type of research tools, analytical tools, or how to do the coding, we need to know what type of methodology are we going to adopt in our particular study. So basically, today we are going to talk about understand the nature and importance of the qualitative studies in a very nutshell, and thereafter the employee of different types of qualitative data analysis methods, including the content analysis and the thematic analysis. And if time permits, we can touch certain areas of the grounded theory. And one of the other main issues that our researchers face is the reliability and the validity issues. So we will be touching upon those areas as well. So when to use the qualitative methods? We tend to use the qualitative methods if we do not know what to expect. For example, we have a certain social phenomena and we do not know what has happened and what will happen in the future. So we have to use the qualitative methods. And if the cause for a certain phenomena is unknown, for example, right, the fish is dead in a water resource, right? But we do not know what has happened. So we go and inquire. We conduct a small investigation to identify the cause, and thereafter we can get some tips from the villagers, from the fishermen. Okay, then we proceed. And again, if the data involved with experience, meanings, and perspectives, or the standpoints of the participants, which cannot be quantified. And again, if you cannot give numerical data, numerical values to the data, for example, a tree, right? It is in the management and the social sciences, you cannot give a numerical data or value to a tree to prove it is a tree. And again, if the numerical values are not strong or sufficient enough to explain a phenomena, we use the qualitative methods. And if the research problem is about an unattended social issue, we use qualitative methods. And again, if your intuition, if you're a seasoned researcher, seasoned qualitative researcher, right, you will get the sense, okay, at this point, I must use the qualitative research methodology. Then you have to go for the qualitative methods. So when we are doing a qualitative study, there are different types of qualitative data sources that we can employ. They could vary from interviews to focus group discussions, audios, videos, images, books, discussions, newspaper articles, speeches, formal or informal conversations, and advertisements. And some of these data sources you might find, okay, strange. For example, newspaper articles. We can use it. They are very reliable sources of data. Perhaps the perspectives of the public about a certain phenomena, right? Sri Lanka in a kind of a grave debt situation, and what the people are saying about it. And again, say some information available in a blog site about a certain thing or about the cricket, right? You can analyze the data. Or the people's travel behavior during this post-pandemic situation, and what type of the travel movements they are updating in their Facebook, their Instagram, right? Or in the WeChat or the WhatsApp status, right? They also fall into the qualitative data sources, but are highly untouched, right? They haven't been properly identified as data sources by the qualitative researchers, even internationally. So when it comes to the analysis of qualitative data, there are different research methods, research approaches, and the tools that we can use. We have the content analysis, thematic analysis mainly, and thereafter we have the grounded theory, ethnography, analytic induction, qualitative comparative analysis, phenomenology, narrative and biography, conversation analysis, discourse analysis, Q method, semiotics, etc. Now we are going to touch each of them one by one, and then we are going to dive into the content analysis and thematic analysis. So when it comes to grounded theory, any experience with grounded theory? Any of you? Is there anyone? use the grounded theory? Right. So remember, when it comes to the grounded theory, it is said the theory is grounded. Wow, okay. Can we do a research study without having a theory? Certainly we can do. That is what we call is the grounded theory. The theory is grounded. Theory is grounded. There's no theory. But still we have a research problem in our mind. We have a research focus. We know what type of data are we going to use, right? And we have some idea, okay, how are we going to combine different elements of our data, right? Or maybe some repeating data, curious data, some innovative data, right? So there is a way of combining them, right? And finally, however, most importantly, as a result of your grounded theory, you should be able to generate a new theory, right? And when doing so, the NVivo is the most recommended software to do the analysis, right? Because we have the different levels of coding, right? We know the open coding, we know eggshell coding, we know focus coding, right? We know thematic coding, right? We can come into that slide little later, introduced by the Julius and Stratus in 1993. And we have the ethnography method. The ethnography helps us to learn the culture of a particular setting or environment. You can go to a post-war area and you can interview some people and identify, you can go to a kind of a post-war area and see how the cultural practices are being preserved there. Traditional art, traditional dance, right? Folk music, the behavior of the people, and how they could vary from a setting to setting, post-war setting to a non-post-war setting or a threatened setting, right? Ethnography, a study of culture, people's behavior, people's movement that can also be done through qualitative analysis. Thereafter, we have this analytic induction. It teaches you how to systematically develop causal relationship for types of phenomena, and it has a greater flexibility. Types of phenomena in the sense we can identify a limited number of phenomena or some incidents and make a connection, right? For example, in one particular area, the drug usage or the tourist arrivals has gone up. Drug usage has therefore gone up, right? And in the meantime, the hospital records that the spread of the HIV/AIDS has gone up, right? So analytic induction helps us to combine all these cases together and come to a rational decision. So remember, that is also a very valid qualitative data analysis method. Thereafter, we have the qualitative comparative analysis, determining which logical conclusions a data set supports. In order to do that, we are going to use the Boolean algebra. There's a separate software for that, FSQCA. Actually, we are planning to do some other workshops with that FSQCA. We call it the fuzzy sets qualitative comparative analysis. In the fuzzy sets qualitative comparative analysis, we are using the binaries, which means 0, 1, dots, right? These full stops, right? We can use them and we can interpret the conditions that might satisfy a certain requirement. For example, a little girl want to go to the supermarket and need to buy some candy. A little girl wants to buy the candy, and what type of conditions that need to be perfected, that need to be completed for that girl to buy the candy. She has to have money, so we give maybe 0 for that. She has to have the access to the supermarket, so we again give 1 for that, right? Or she has to get the consent of the parents, we can assign 1 to that. So whatever the agreeable conditions, we give 1s, and whatever unfavorable conditions, we give 0s. right? So that is how this Boolean algebra works. Actually, it lies in between the qualitative and the quantitative methods, right? It's in between. And thereafter we come to the phenomenology, the study of structures of consciousness as experienced from the first person point of view or people's lived experience, right? The COVID situation is now there, right? And how the people spend their lives or how they spend the time during their quarantine period, that is a phenomenology, how they spend the time, phenomenology. And we have people who have the first-hand experience at war, right? So how they lived the life, right, with the bullet-ridden walls and the topless palmyra trees and having the coffees and the mix flying up in the sky, phenomenology, right? We look into the consciousness as experience from the first person's point of view, right? However, when writing research papers using these methods, you can use the first person language, right? I felt this, I felt that, I ate this thing, I used to run to the bushes whenever these fights took place, right? The first person language is also used in the phenomenology. Thereafter, we have the narrative and the biography. It is concerned with the reconstruction of personal life histories and the constitution of meaning based on biographical narratives and the documents. Or in other words, simply it is interpretivism, right? I hope you remember the famous leader we have from South Africa, right? The Nelson Mandela, and his biography has been sold the millions of copies around the world. That is narrative and biography, right? Or else that is into this larger context. But again, we can take how, I mean, you visit a country like China and their social customs and the practices, food habits, everything is different, right? So have you experienced it? And in Vietnam, in South Korea, they have these dog meat eating festivals. And what do you feel when the other people consume the dog meat, right? So you can use your first person language, right? And you can express your feelings, and or you can interpret. That is narrative and biography. And the types of qualitative analysis does not stop from there but goes further. And thereafter we have the conversation analysis. If you're into sociology, if you're into the anthropology, you can refer to different dialogues that took place in between the sociologists, right? For example, let's say Michael Foucault, right? The one who introduced the discourses in between sex, gender, and the power, right? How they are interrelated and how they are controlling different social variables, right? And he has been interviewed by another another sociologist in France. So such conversation can be analyzed in a rational way. And again, we can use the in vivo for that. And we call it the technology of conversation. And again, you can interview a veteran scholar, a veteran expert, maybe in your medical field, and get his or her opinion about the root cause for this particular disease. I mean, there are different diseases that we haven't identified the root causes, so we can build up the opinions. We can gather the opinions of the experts with their tacit knowledge. They will come up with different suggestions. We can have the group discussion for them, right? We put the idea, we let the experts to talk about it, we record it, and then we come for the conversation analysis. So remember, these particular methods are very useful when it comes to the social sciences or science medical different fields. And thereafter we have the discourse analysis, which is studying written or spoken language in relation to its social context. And it aims to understand how language is used in real life situation, especially for the people in the languages and the humanities, especially for this. I highly recommend this method for the people from these language departments, right? English teaching units, French, Chinese teaching units. So you can refer to the language. For example, you can take the William Tolstoy, how he has written or how he has interpreted or described or illustrated a phenomena, right? We see, for example, when I see a naked body of a woman, right? The way I interpret could be totally different from the Leo Tolstoy, right? How these historians or uh, this literature people, how they do it, right? So that is discourse analysis. Or else we can refer to, I mean, under this context, how the English language have been evolved, right? The evolution of the English language since 1960s. Sorry, since the 16th century, 18th century, right? Or the 19th century and 20th century. And so as the Sinhalese language, right? We had the ancient Sanskrit language, we had the Pali, now we are moving into English, now we have the Singlish, right? And where are we headed? So we have the discourse analysis for that. We also have the Q method. It is a very latest one. If possible, use this type of new methods in your research, because as I told you earlier, the acceptability by a journal will definitely go high. And that is systematic study of participants' viewpoint or on different stances on an issue, or the perspective research, right? We have a certain phenomena, a situation. We ask different perspective from the people who really faced it. For example, the arrival of the tourists to Bentota area. The three-wheel drivers will comment positively about this situation. The spa owners will comment positively, the hoteliers will comment positively, the beach boys will comment positively, but the Pansale Hamdru will might comment negatively, saying, okay, the teachers or some parents might comment negatively, saying that, okay, there are these type of social issues that promotes with the arrival of tourists, so we need to have a kind of a control mechanism, right? So that is known as a perspective research. And finally, we have, right, out of my small list, actually, there are hundreds of different ways. We have the study of signs and symbols and their use or interpretation. Signs and symbols. For example, you go to a place where a Buddhist majority lives. For example, you go to Monaragala or Ambilipitia, like 95% of the residents there are Buddhist. And in the mid of this Sinhalese Buddhist village, you find a big kind of this cross symbol, cross in the sense this the Christian symbol, right? The Jesus Christ. And what does that mean? What does that mean to you? How are you going to interpret it? The influence of Christianity to the Buddhist villages, or what? Who has installed it there? Is there a Catholic church there? Is there a shrine there? Right? Or are they doing something else? In the meantime, similarly, you can go to Jaffna. You can see how the new temples are being constructed there in Jaffna, and why there are so many Buddhist flags in these Tamil majority areas during the periods of the Vesak and Poson. What type of message are they going to pass down to the residents there? Right? I hope you are getting what I mean, right? So that is semiotics, study of signs and the symbols and their use of interpretation. And again, right, building the Tilipan memorial in Jaffna and destroying it, and building Hasalakagahmini's memorial in Jaffna and keeping it. Okay, they are also a big part of the semiotics, right? So they are the different types of qualitative data analysis methods that we have to consider when we are going to select the most appropriate data, the analytical method. Now we are going to talk about thematic analysis. And as I briefly described earlier, there are different data analysis methods in the qualitative research, and thematic analysis is definitely one of the most popular methods in data analysis. So thematic analysis is a commonly used qualitative method to identify, report, and analyze the data for the meanings produced in and by the people, situations, and the events, right? We have some data and we are trying to identify the meanings, right? We have the latent content, we have the manifest content, right? We are trying to interpret what are the people are saying, right? And again, if the things are repeating, we are going to combine them together. And if they are kind of similar to a kind of a theory, we are going to introduce the theory and make the themes, right? So you are correct. So coding is the primary process for developing themes within the raw data by recognizing important moments in the data and encoding it prior to the interpretation. So when we have a transcription at hand, so, right, or when we have any other data sources, it could be the web content or user generated content, or it could be some other internet based data, it could be anything, right? We need to start with the open coding. We do not keep, and importantly in the thematic analysis, we do not keep a predefined themes in our mind, right? We let the data to speak. We do the open coding, right? And thereafter we are going to make the categories and we let the data to speak. That is important in the thematic analysis. However, before going into the thematic or the analytical part of the thematic analysis, we need to follow this immersion technique, data immersion technique. Data immersion in the sense you dive in, or you plunge into the data, or you start reading, rereading, and rereading. And how many times possibly do you have to read? For me, right, I read 2 times my entire data set before I go for the analysis. Why? I do the interview, I physically engage with that, right? I maybe if time permits, I do the transcribing, or my research associates do that. My research team does that, and thereafter you need to read it. You need to read and you need to understand what the data is trying to say. The data is actually speaking to us, and it is us who must have a good ear to listen to it and catch up the important themes and the phrases. So you need to dive in. You need to see what is there, right? It is like a kind of a gem worker, right? He's working in the gem pit, right? Or many garano process, right? And after engaging with that, after doing this garima, right, you get the gems in the bottom of that hut, right? So that is data immersion. You dive in, you plunge in, you read, reread, and you understand it, and then small ideas will start sparkling in your head. Data immersion. So thematic analysis as an independent qualitative descriptive approach is mainly described as a method for identifying, analyzing, and reporting patterns or themes within the data. That's the definition. And it has been suggested that thematic analysis as a flexible and useful research tool provides a rich and detailed yet complex account of the data. You might have hundreds of transcriptions, right? And you do the open coding, and thereafter you start categorizing it, and it will give you some rich volume of data. You will get maybe the necessary, unnecessary, right, or maybe necessary or some floating ideas in your data set. Okay, we have to have the flexible approach for that. And clearly, thematic analysis involves the search for an identification of common threads that extend across an entire interview or set of interviews. Because why? It is easy because we have either in-depth interviews, we have the semi-structured interviews, and we have some topics to ask, right? And then the participants' responses will have some similarities. There might be some similar ideas coming up as their responses. So we need to combine them together. So basically, this is the graphical illustration of the thematic analysis. First, you have this the entire your transcription, and thereafter you have this coding. You start with line by line coding in the sense you have to read each and every line carefully, right? And thereafter you start highlighting. Then okay, manually remember how you did your how you studied for your advanced level, right? You had all the books and you start doing the short notes. You had these colorful, maybe the yellow, maybe the green, maybe some other color highlights, and thereafter we start highlighting, we start underlining and everything, right? And then the everything colored in yellow will be put into another book, another paper. Everything colored in green will be put into another book. Everything colored in blue will be taken into another piece of paper, right? That is creation of categories, and highlighting is the coding. And where we identify the categories, we give them the name, right? Environmental impact, socio-cultural impact, and then we give them theme. When introducing a theme, definitely you must associate your study to a theory, well-established theory. So how does content analysis differ from the thematic analysis? Actually, there are different ways of we doing the content analysis. අපි ගැන හිමිට පස්සේ කතා කරමු. If you are going to stop your data analysis by creation of categories, which means right here, right, we call it the content analysis. We are not going to develop the themes. And again, if you are going to use the theory and combine these main categories together, we generate the themes and we call it the thematic analysis. That is one way of the content analysis, but there are different quantifiable ways that we can employ in the content analysis. Right. So when it comes to the thematic analysis, the data analysis, there are a few steps that we have to follow. Number one is the data immersion. To plunge or sink into a state of body or mind, to involve deeply, to steep, absorb in some action or activity. You get into the data. It's like you dive into a swimming pool, right? When you dive into a swimming pool, what you find all around you, it's water. So let the data become the water and let the data covers you, right? That is dive in. So then you feel, you understand what this data is all about. And then you come to the analyzing the transcript. The interviewer should involve the analyzing the data. Remember, right? Although you assign this particular task to your research associates, your research team members, maybe some students, you need to have the close supervision. You need to have a close supervision. Why? Some issues in this data transcribing process. The language issues say, from you do the study in Sinhalese, interview the people in Sinhalese, and you translate into English, right? And the original meanings might lost, right? That is important. So you need to employ kind of some professional interpreters. And again, the transcribers, right? Touch typist employ karana puluwan. And when they are using, when you are going to use the touch typist, right? The data might get distorted. Right? Sometimes they will feel bored. Sometimes they will feel that, okay, this word need not to be mentioned. And sometimes they will feel, okay, a person is giving the response. For example, also manggila tino yapane, eunata mata na. Sama yapane gihilla tino eunata manghita neka honda tanak. නෑ නෑ මම මෙහෙම කිව්වොත් එහෙම සම යාපනයේ ගිහිල්ලා තිනවා අපේ ගමේ කට්ටියත් එක්ක ඒක එතකොට මට ආරක්ෂාකාරී. Okay, I mean, the people might respond in like that, right? They might start saying one thing and they stop halfway through, and they will visit back to the original place where they started answering and will start developing the sentence again. We can interpret such things, right? Those things are important. And repeated reading and rereading of interview transcripts and the contextual data and listening to the recordings, that is important, right? When it comes to the interviews, we must record it, essential. And therefore we have the line by line reading, and we have the feelings and the emotions. Are we going to consider them as well, right? In the post-war context, right, the Sinhalese mothers lost their sons and the Tamil mothers lost their sons, daughters, and the families, right? The both sides are the victims. And when you ask about them, right, whether they tear, right, or do they look angry, right, or do they look desperate or maybe frustrated or kind of, I mean, these emotions are very much crucial in qualitative research, right? You might be asking, especially if you're we have the doctors here, right? You all the time when a patient approaches you, you ask the question, ammi kavada, right? The patient might look the other side and say, oh kava, right? So then does the interview ends here? No, right? She looks the other way and says, okay, api kave නැති වුණත් කෑවේ නැහැ කියන අපි ලැජ්ජයි, right? So you need to ask about the details. Remember, in the qualitative research we need about the details. අම්මියන මොනවද කෑවේ? මම බත් කෑවා. That's the answer, because the patient might try to avoid the question, right? බත් කෑවේ මොනවත් එක්කද? The third question we have to ask, බතුයි පරිප්පුයි, right? Batui sambolai. Is it nutritious? No way, right? So you identify, okay, malnutrition must be an issue, right? So that is how we built up our conclusions, right? I mean, those things will start giving us some hints. Okay, what's the problem with this lady, with this person, and how do they work? You look at the behavior of the patient. Her hand might be shivering, her shoulders might be struggling, right? There could be different things, right? Feelings and emotions important. When you ask the questions, they are not keeping the eye contact with you. What does that say, right? In different contexts, they will pass down very important messages, and we as qualitative researchers, we must be able to interpret it. We have the interpretivism, a very important research approach in qualitative research, that is important. And thereafter we come to the coding. The codes are descriptive labels that are applied to segments of the transcripts. The researcher has to be very familiar with the data in order to do the coding, and the coding is identified significant or interesting data, right? Api එක ජාති data අරගෙන අපි එකට දානවා. We did that, right? We have the codes, we drag and drop, right, from the main manuscript or the transcription. We copy and we drag and drop into the coding. That is how we do that. And the words, phrases, sentences, or sections, actions, activities, concepts, differences, opinions, processes, etc. can be coded. However, when doing the coding, remember the limitations of the words you are going to use. When it comes to the content analysis, it is fine. You can have some small the length of the sentence doesn't matter really, right? As long as they give something, right? Maybe a beautiful tree, a large temple, right? A sunny weather, right? Cold weather, right? Or hot food gives the meaning. When it comes to thematic analysis, sorry, when it comes to the content analysis, you can use it, but when it comes to thematic analysis, we highly recommend the researchers to go for the phrases, at least for one sentence with the context in it, right? And you need to do the codes, you need to code as much as possible. They could be hundreds or thousands. With my personal experience, my goodness, I have done thousands of coding, thousands and thousands and thousands, right? Maybe with 400 different data sources, right? Or maybe 30, 40 lengthy transcriptions, or maybe thousands of TripAdvisor data, some bookings.com data, right? Some WeChat data, Facebook data. We have to do thousands, but it doesn't say you are correct, but you have to do it, and then the themes will start emerging. And again, it requires a clear sense of the context in which statements in interview data are made. For example, when we are interviewing a hotel employee about his job and the performance, maybe about the motivation, right? Stress, level of stress, we ask different questions, and a response like this: I feel very tired during my work as a waiter. I feel very tired during my work as a waiter. So what type of information does it really give us? He's feeling tired, right? I told you, we have the manifest content and we have the latent content. According to the manifest content, he's feeling tired. I mean, that is what comes to our eye, right? At a mahansi. And what time does he get tired? During his work. During his work. And what is his work? He's a waiter somewhere in a hotel. That is the manifest content. And then what is the latent content here? Right? The meanings behind this particular statement. Is he tired? Is he bored? Is he kind of frustrated? Oh, is he having family problems? Right? Or he might be having a sick child at home, so he's up all the night. So following day, he cannot work actively in the restaurant. That is the latent content, guys. Right? So we need to look behind the meaning of these words. So sometimes a word, phrase, or paragraph may be attributed to more than one code, right? Just like this particular sentence, I feel very tired during my work as a waiter, right? There are 3 different pieces of information that you can attribute it to 3 different codes. If more than one researcher is coding the data, it is important to put processes in the place for checking that the development of codes and the meanings attributed to them are consistently applied by other team members. Remember, if you are doing the thematic analysis or the content analysis with the team, you need to have clear definitions for each and every code. You need to have a clear-cut idea, right? Otherwise, you are in a big mess, right? Especially if you're doing this online, you keep your main database in a cloud, and you gain access to the database by being at home, right? All the researchers are staying at home and you do it online, right? එක්කෙනෙක් පළවෙනි කෝඩ් එකට දානවා behavior එක ගැන, තව එක්කෙනෙක් පළවෙනි කෝඩ් එකට දානවා intention එක ගැන, right? So we really do not want to mess with our data. So that is why we need to define the data, what data goes to which codes. And sometimes when we are doing a lot of coding, right, we don't know I told you the data will speak to you, the data will speak to us, right? When we are developing some data or the codes, you will understand, okay, mama වැරද්දක් කරලා තියෙනවා, this particular section can be combined with that particular codes. මේ ටික අර කෝඩ් එකට දාන්න පුළුවන්, අර ටික මේ කෝඩ් එකට දාන්න පුළුවන්. So this is a tiresome process. Yes, you have to uncode the entire block and you have to do the recoding. That is the only way out, right? So but that is worthwhile, right? Because the data is speaking. Let the data to speak to you, right? So you uncode everything, you start recoding. So what to code in a nutshell? If something repeats and if it is surprises you, and if it state explicit facts or the statements, some facts statements, and if it is similar to a research work you have read before somewhere in some corner of the world, you have referred to that, maybe in your school, maybe in your the first year or the second year in the university. And again, if this particular sentence reminds you of a kind of a theory or to a concept, theory concept make related on, you need to quote that as well. Oh, finally, as I told earlier, if it intuits you what therena me research එක මේ particular fact එක මෙයා මේ කියලා තියෙන දේ මට අදාළයි තමයි, right? So you can take it as a floating idea, maybe. I mean, if you cannot put it into a kind of a established code or category, you can keep it separately. At one point it might come to you. So this is the thematic analysis coding according to Strauss and Juliet 1994. The initial coding, the open coding. අපි මුලින්ම මේ codes ටික පටන් ගන්නවා. Okay, we do not have a free schedule, right? Of course, if your research is based on a deductive approach, okay, you can develop a kind of a coding framework, that is fine. But if you are going to do it inductively, you have to do it openly, open coding, right? We also call it the initial coding. It is in this level you will get like thousands of codes, right? මම කරපු එක study එක, first I had 438 initial codes, and then I divided it among 8 focus codes, and then I combined them into 3 overarching themes with the support of a certain theory, and thereafter we move into the theory development. So level 1 coding will have a large quantities of raw data, qualitative data, focus and label during the level 1, and level 2 focus coding or category development. The level 2 coding re-examines the level 1 codes and further focuses the data, right? අපි ඒවා එකතු කරගෙන ඉස්සරහට යනවා. So and thereafter we come to the creation of categories. After creating these open codes then අපි හදලා ඉවරයි. ඊට පස්සේ අපි දැන් open codes එකට එකතු කර ගන්නවා. Now at this point you will have maybe 400 or 200 codes, but within each of these small codes there will be 10-15 different references. පොඩි references ගොඩාක් මේ එක එක codes ඇතුලේ තියෙන්න පුළුවන්, right? Remember, so how to create the categories? So when creating the categories, as I illustrated earlier, we need to look for the similarities, right? මේවා තියෙන සම්බන්ධතා මොනවද? Detailed examination of the data is carried out to categorize the ways in which research participants speak about aspects of the issue under investigation. And this linking of codes aim to create coherent categories and is the third step in analyzing the interview data or the qualitative data. And the analytic categories are saturated when there is sufficient information for the experience to be seen as coherent and explicable. Api danna data saturation method is there. It is the point where there is no new data is being created, right? So the things are saturated, and the many researchers stop at this step and report findings based on the categories. So that is the content analysis. However, if you are going to introduce a theme, then we introduce a theory, we come to a thematic analysis. There could be missing pieces like coding is done I mean the floating ideas must be there. Make categories sort of than very in the puluang, right? You have to maybe, I mean, what I do practically is that I create a separate code and I put it like other, because you never know what will come next, right? Maybe at the discussion level, maybe at the conclusion, when you're writing your discussion by referring to the previous studies, right? So please do not delete it, put it under another category, so keep it, right? You do not have to necessarily delete them. Right, and then we come to the identification of themes. Here the categories development, right? You have initial codes as I explained earlier, and thereafter we come to the focus codes. And the identification of themes combine categories together according to their relevance and considering their connection to each other, right? How they connect to each other, and thereafter we describe the connections between the categories. The themes developed and their connections are the main result of your study, right? And the high quality research identify the themes by linking the categories with social theories. As I explained earlier, we need to introduce some social theories. So maybe if you're into the science and medicine, if you have some theories, it is okay, introduce it. Right. So thematic analysis comes here. The previous coding is studied to develop highly defined themes. Metan api themes hadana, themes වලට කියන තව නමක් තමයි thematic coding වලට කියන තව නමක් තමයි axial coding, right? This is the place where the thematic analysis stops, and thereafter if you're going to generate a new theory, right, we call it the grounded theory. So here an illustration of initial themes may appear open coding with EG, JB. I mean, these are the some abbreviations for the respondents, right? And thereafter I can color them, right, according to the I mean the relevancy or the groupability of each of these references, right? Then I put them together, right? And I can introduce the codes. My primary themes can make codes, right? And thereafter for each of these codes there has to be the references, the direct quotations from our transcriptions, right? Theme 1, theme 2, and thereafter you need to start discussing, so it is easy. Okay, now we are going to talk about how we have practically done that.